He wasn't here. Kids weren't here. I have no idea like where they went. I don't feel like this is even real right now. It's like a nightmare that I just can't wake up from.
She's pregnant as well.
How far along?
14, 15 weeks.
Case 1. On the morning of August 13, 2018, in Frederick, Colorado, 34-year-old Chris Watts appeared before cameras, pleading for the safe return of his pregnant wife, Shanann, and their 2 daughters, Bella and Celeste. His tone was calm, his eyes dry, his words measured. He told reporters he just wanted his family back. According to investigators, the first signs of trouble appeared when Shanann's friend reported her missing after failing to reach her for hours. Within days, attention turned toward the husband whose composure seemed too controlled. Police were dispatched to the Watts home after Shanann's friend, Nicole Atkinson, requested a welfare check. The house appeared immaculate, but Shanann's phone, purse, and car was still there. Chris claimed she'd taken the kids to a friend's house, yet his story shifted with every retelling. Body camera footage showed him pacing, arms crossed, struggling to sound convincing. The officer noted his lack of panic and visible detachment. By evening, the search expanded through nearby neighborhoods and fields. But the evidence at the scene didn't match the story Chris told. Surveillance cameras from a neighbor's home soon captured movements that would shatter his lies. Shanann Watts was 34, a driven sales representative for a nutrition company called Thrive. Online, she shared motivational videos and glowing posts about her family. The Watts household, with its new house, matching outfits, and smiling family photos, seemed enviable. But behind the curated image, cracks had formed. Chris was emotionally distant, spending late nights on his phone, and Shanann, then 15 weeks pregnant, sensed something was wrong. Friends later told investigators she feared he was having an affair. The cheerful videos masked tension, mounting debt, and growing silence between husband and wife. It would take only days for that carefully built illusion to unravel. Detectives began reconstructing the family's final hours. The neighbor's security footage showed Chris backing his work truck into the garage early that morning, an unusual move. He stayed inside for nearly an hour before leaving for work. Investigators searched the house, finding no signs of forced entry, but detected a faint odor of cleaning chemicals. When questioned, Chris denied any wrongdoing and volunteered for a polygraph test. He failed. The examiner told him calmly, "There's only one person who knows what happened." That moment cracked the facade. Then, a single security camera revealed what had really happened in the pre-dawn darkness. Confronted with mounting evidence, Chris confessed. He first claimed Shanann had killed their daughters and that he acted in rage, but the truth was worse. He admitted to strangling Shanann in their bed after an argument and then driving her body, along with his still-living daughters, to an oil field owned by his employer, Anadarko Petroleum. There, he buried Shanann in a shallow grave and smothered Bella and Celeste before placing the bodies in separate oil tanks. The confession stunned investigators. When confronted with the evidence, the suspect gave a statement that shifted the entire case from tragedy to calculated murder. Public outrage followed immediately. The image of a smiling family man-turned-killer dominated headlines. Videos of Shanann's positivity became haunting reminders of sincerity destroyed by deceit. In November 2018, Chris Watts pleaded guilty to 9 counts of murder, avoiding the death penalty at the request of Shanann's family. He was sentenced to 5 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole. From prison in Wisconsin, he rarely speaks, occasionally writing letters to strangers seeking meaning in the aftermath. But no explanation can reconcile the horror of his actions. Chris Watts didn't just kill his family. He destroyed the illusion of the perfect life, proving that evil can wear a smile. Case 2. On June 7, 2021, in rural Colleton County, South Carolina, 53-year-old attorney Alex Murdaugh called 911, his voice trembling as he reported finding his wife, Maggie, and youngest son, Paul, shot near the dog kennels of their 1,700-acre Moselle estate. Deputies arrived to a scene of chaos, shell casings scattered, 2 bodies lifeless on the ground, and a man pacing in shock. According to investigators, the first signs of suspicion appeared when details of Alex's timeline began to shift. Within days, attention turned toward the grieving husband whose family name had ruled the region's legal system for generations. The Moselle property was a private empire, a hunting estate owned by one of South Carolina's most powerful families. The Murdaughs had held influence for over a century, serving as prosecutors and lawyers across the Low Country. But that night, the illusion of privilege cracked. Maggie, 52, and Paul, 22, were found shot multiple times, Paul by shotgun, Maggie by rifle. Alex told investigators he had just returned from visiting his mother, claiming he discovered the scene moments later. For the first few weeks, the killings drew sympathy. The community mourned with the Murdaughs, unaware that the deaths would expose one of the state's most tangled webs of corruption and deceit. But soon, the evidence began to contradict his story. For decades, the Murdaugh name meant power. Alex worked at the family firm, his lineage stretching back through 3 generations of solicitors. His wealth came from lawsuits and settlements, his reputation from courtroom victories. But beneath the polished surface, the dynasty was cracking. Lawsuits, mounting debt, and the 2019 boating death of teenager Mallory Beach, involving Paul Murdaugh as a driver, placed the family under scrutiny. Behind closed doors, Alex's law firm had begun discovering missing client funds. By 2021, his empire was collapsing. Prosecutors later revealed that he had been stealing millions to fund an opioid addiction and maintain his lavish lifestyle. It would take only days for the mask to fall completely. Investigators combed through digital evidence, phone data, and GPS records. They discovered that Alex's alibi didn't hold. Cell phone records placed him at the kennels minutes before the murders, contradicting his statement that he hadn't been there. A Snapchat video taken by Paul just before his death contained his father's voice in the background, irrefutable proof of his presence. Forensic accountants then uncovered years of theft, check fraud, and embezzlement from clients and the firm. The murders, investigators believe, were committed to buy time, to generate sympathy and delay exposure of his crimes. Then, a single digital recording revealed what had really happened at Moselle. In July 2022, after months of unraveling financial records and reconstructing timelines, Alex Murdaugh was charged with the murders of his wife and son. The state's theory was clear. He killed to distract from his impending financial ruin and professional downfall. His lies about his location, combined with forensic evidence, built an airtight case. When confronted with the evidence, the suspect gave a statement that shifted the entire case. He admitted to stealing millions of dollars, but continued to deny involvement in the murders. His deception ran deep. A man who once stood above the law now trapped by it. The trial began in January 2023 and captivated the nation. Prosecutors presented evidence of greed, addiction, and desperation, while the defense painted him as a broken man framed by circumstance. The jury deliberated for just 3 hours. Alex Murdaugh was found guilty on all counts and sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms without parole. The conviction ended a century-old dynasty that had shaped South Carolina's justice system. In the months that followed, he faced dozens more charges of fraud and theft. The Murdaugh name, once synonymous with power, became a symbol of decay. The dynasty didn't fall to outsiders. It collapsed under its own secrets. Case 3. On January 9, 1993, in the quiet village of Prevessin-Moens, France, firefighters responded to a house engulfed in flames. Inside, they found the bodies of 37-year-old Florence Romand and her 2 young children, Antoine and Caroline. Nearby, the family dog was dead. Upstairs, rescuers discovered 39-year-old Jean-Claude Romand unconscious but alive, overcome by smoke. At first, it appeared to be a tragic accident, a respectable doctor's family killed in a house fire. But according to investigators, the first signs of doubt appeared when no medical identification or hospital records could be found for the man everyone thought was a physician. Within days, the image of the beloved family doctor began to unravel. As authorities examined the scene, inconsistencies surfaced. The fire had been deliberately set. Florence and the children had died hours before the blaze, killed by blunt force trauma. Jean-Claude's injuries were self-inflicted. Detectives soon learned that he had not gone to work that day, or any day. What began as a domestic tragedy evolved into a deception unlike anything France had seen. For 18 years, Romand had pretended to be a successful World Health Organization doctor in Geneva. Each morning, he left home wearing a white coat, kissed his family goodbye, and drove to the Swiss border. But instead of entering an office, he spent his days sitting in parking lots and cafes, reading medical journals to maintain his charade. The discovery exposed a career and a life built entirely on lies. To his family and friends, Jean-Claude was brilliant and humble. His wife, Florence, trusted him completely. His parents were proud of his supposed position at the WHO. Neighbors admired his car, his trips to conferences, and his soft-spoken demeanor. Yet behind the facade was a man with no degree, no job, and no income. He had dropped out of medical school in his second year and never told anyone. To sustain his fabricated life, he convinced relatives and friends to invest money in non-existent Swiss accounts, promising high returns. The funds paid for his house, vacations, and luxury lifestyle. Everyone he deceived was someone who loved him. For nearly 2 decades, they never suspected that the doctor they trusted was a ghost. The investigation revealed how meticulously Romand had constructed his double life. Police searched his car and found maps, fabricated business cards, and WHO pamphlets used to reinforce his identity. They traced phone calls to fake offices and discovered that his claimed salary had been funded entirely by fraud. Forensic accountants uncovered missing savings belonging to his in-laws and family friends. The pressure had been mounting. In early 1993, one friend demanded proof of their investment, and Florence began questioning inconsistencies in his schedule. Romand's false world was collapsing. Detectives concluded that exposure was imminent, and that fear had triggered the violence. Then, interviews with surviving relatives revealed a pattern of manipulation that had trapped them all for years. When interrogated in the hospital, Jean-Claude confessed. He admitted to killing his wife, his children, and his parents to prevent them from discovering the truth. He claimed he loved them too much to let them see his failure. Investigators called it the ultimate act of narcissism, murder disguised as mercy. When confronted with the evidence, the suspect gave a statement that shifted the entire case. He described his double life as a disease of imagination, insisting that he believed he could keep it alive forever. His confession stunned the nation. It wasn't just murder. It was a collapse of an illusion built on vanity, fear, and deceit. The trial began in 1996 and gripped France. Psychiatrists described Romand as detached from reality, a man who had blurred the line between truth and fiction. The prosecution called him a manipulator who killed out of cowardice, not madness. He was found guilty of 5 counts of murder and sentenced to life in prison with no parole for 22 years. For decades, he remained silent behind bars, occasionally granting interviews to criminologists studying pathological lying. In 2019, after 26 years in prison, Jean-Claude Romand was released on parole, living under supervision in a monastery near Lyon. The decision outraged the public. To this day, he remains a chilling reminder of how lies can become a life, and how far someone will go to protect them. Case 4. In 1984, 18-year-old Elizabeth Fritzl vanished from the small town of Amstetten, Austria. Her parents told police she had run away to join a cult, supported by a handwritten letter supposedly from her confirming it. The note, mailed weeks after her disappearance, seemed convincing enough to close the case. Her mother wept with relief, unaware the letter was a lie written under duress. According to investigators, the first signs of truth appeared decades later when a critically ill young woman was rushed to a hospital, carrying a story that would horrify the world. Within days, the secret beneath an ordinary suburban home began to unravel. On April 19, 2008, a 19-year-old girl named Kirsten was admitted to an Austrian hospital in a coma. Her grandfather, Josef Fritzl, claimed she had suddenly fallen ill. Doctors, however, noticed signs of lifelong malnutrition and lack of sunlight. When they appealed to the public for the girl's mother to come forward, the decades-old missing person case of Elizabeth Fritzl resurfaced. The next day, Elizabeth appeared at the hospital, trembling and pale, claiming to be Kirsten's mother. But when police questioned her privately, she revealed the unthinkable. She had been held captive by her father for 24 years in a hidden basement below the family home. That hospital visit exposed one of the darkest crimes in modern history. Josef Fritzl was a respected engineer and landlord in Amstetten, known for his precision and privacy. To neighbors, he was strict but ordinary. Beneath his house, however, he had spent years constructing a secret bunker, a soundproof, windowless series of rooms hidden behind a reinforced steel door. He told others it was a fallout shelter, but it was a prison built for his daughter. On August 28, 1984, he lured Elizabeth into the cellar under pretense of helping him carry a door. Once inside, he locked it behind her. For the next 2 decades, he visited almost nightly, controlling every aspect of her life. Over time, Elizabeth gave birth to 7 children. 3 remained underground with her. 3 were taken upstairs to live with Joseph and his wife under false pretenses, and 1 died shortly after birth. The father's obsession had become a world sealed in darkness. When detectives raided the house after Elizabeth's hospital confession, they discovered the unimaginable. Behind a series of concealed panels and corridors lay the underground complex: low ceilings, concrete walls, a single bed, a small stove, and decaying furniture. The space reeked of damp air and confinement. Children's drawings hung on the walls beside makeshift lights that never dimmed. DNA tests confirmed that Joseph was both father and grandfather to the children. Investigators traced years of forged letters Elizabeth had been forced to write, claiming she was living freely. The evidence left no doubt. Then, the officers descended deeper into the hidden rooms, finding proof of a 24-year imprisonment that continued directly beneath an unsuspecting household. When confronted, Josef Fritzl showed no remorse. He calmly explained how he had created a second family underground and claimed he had provided everything they needed to survive. During interrogation, he confessed to building the dungeon, imprisoning his daughter, and fathering her children. He justified it as a private arrangement gone wrong. When confronted with the evidence, the suspect gave a statement that shifted the entire case. His admissions matched every detail of Elizabeth's account, from construction of the cellar to the years of psychological control. The confession confirmed that the crime had not been a moment of madness. It had been a life's work of domination. In 2009, Josef Fritzl stood trial in St. Pölten, Austria, charged with murder, rape, incest, enslavement, and false imprisonment. He pleaded guilty and was sentenced to life in a secure psychiatric facility. His wife, Rosemary, divorced him immediately and fled the region. The physical cellar was sealed forever, its entrance filled with concrete. Elizabeth and her surviving children were relocated under new identities and placed in protected care. Today, she lives in anonymity with her family, rebuilding what was stolen. Fritzl remains confined, his attempts to appeal repeatedly denied by Austrian courts through 2025. The case forced an entire nation to confront the horror that had existed undetected for a quarter of a century, a reminder that sometimes evil lives quietly beneath the floorboards of ordinary life. Case 5. In the early hours of January 14, 2018, a 17-year-old girl climbed out of a window in a quiet suburb of Perry, California, clutching a deactivated cell phone she had kept hidden for months. Her voice trembled as she called 911, telling the dispatcher her 2 younger sisters were chained to their beds. It was the first time she had ever spoken to someone outside her family. According to investigators, the first signs of horror appeared when deputies arrived at the Turpin residence and saw a pale, shaking teenager trying to describe a lifetime of abuse. Within hours, the illusion of a perfect family collapsed. When police entered the single-story house on Muir Woods Road, the smell of decay hit them instantly. Inside, they found 13 children, aged 2 to 29, all severely malnourished, filthy, and frightened. The home was filled with garbage, soiled clothes, and rotting food. Some of the siblings were shackled to their beds, others cowered in corners unable to speak. Their parents, David and Louise Turpin, stood quietly nearby, insisting it was all a misunderstanding. The officers' body cameras captured the shocking scene, a suburban home turned into a prison. That night's discovery would expose years of hidden cruelty behind one of the most disturbing family facades in modern America. David and Louise Turpin had built their lives around the image of religious devotion and discipline. Both raised in strict homes, they believed their family was chosen by God to live apart from a sinful world. They homeschooled their children, dressed them identically, and forbade contact with outsiders. On social media, they posted smiling family photos, coordinated trips to Disneyland, and carefully staged portraits. To neighbors, they appeared unusual but harmless, the quiet family that kept to themselves. Behind closed doors, the children lived in a nightmare. They were starved, beaten, and chained for minor disobedience. Baths were rare, Meals consisted of a few bites of peanut butter, and the children's bodies stopped growing. Their parents' obsession with control had become their religion. Detectives and child welfare officers launched an immediate investigation. They photographed the filthy rooms, piles of waste, and broken locks used to restrain the children. Medical tests confirmed extreme malnutrition, muscle atrophy, and developmental delays. Many of the children could barely speak in full sentences or recall their ages. David Turpin kept detailed journals of punishments, and Louise filmed stage videos of the children singing hymns for relatives online. Interviews revealed a pattern of total domination, sleep deprivation, forced memorization of Bible verses, and threats of damnation if they disobeyed. Then, evidence from the 911 call and the girls' secret photos inside the house revealed what had really happened in the so-called Turpin family home. The arrest came that same day. When confronted, the Turpins confessed to strict discipline but denied abuse. As the investigation deepened, their lies fell apart. Detectives uncovered years of systematic torture and neglect. When confronted with the evidence, the suspects gave statements that shifted the entire case. They claimed they were preparing their children for the apocalypse, justifying their control as spiritual duty. The courtroom would later hear how the children were chained for weeks, forced to live in darkness, and denied medical care. The contrast between their public image and the private reality shocked a nation that had watched them smile for cameras. In February 2019, David and Louise Turpin pleaded guilty to multiple counts of torture, false imprisonment, and child endangerment. They were sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 25 years. The children, now free, entered the foster system. The world celebrated their survival, but the reality was more complicated. In 2024, news broke that several Turpin siblings had suffered new abuse under foster parents later convicted of exploitation. Despite the setbacks, many of the siblings pursued education and independence, determined to rebuild their lives. Jordan Turpin, the daughter who made the 911 call, became a voice for survivors, speaking publicly about courage and resilience. The Turpin case remains a haunting reminder that evil can hide behind family photos, that sometimes the most picture-perfect homes are prisons in disguise. Case 6. On the morning of May 5, 2009, in Columbia, Illinois, police received a 911 call from 32-year-old Chris Coleman, the head of security for the world-famous televangelist Joyce Meyer. He told dispatchers he was worried. His wife and 2 sons weren't answering their phones. Minutes later, officers arrived at the Coleman home to conduct a welfare check. The house was locked, the blinds drawn, and the silence heavy. According to investigators, the first signs of deception appeared when they entered the home and found a scene of horror that contradicted every image Chris had built of faith, family, and devotion. Inside the house, officers discovered the bodies of 31-year-old Sherry Coleman and her 2 sons, Gavin and Garrett, ages 11 and 9. They had been strangled in their beds during the night. The walls of the home were covered in spray-painted messages, "You have paid, punished," and "I told you so." It looked like the work of a religious extremist targeting the Coleman family for Chris's association with Joyce Meyer Ministries. But the evidence didn't fit. There was no forced entry, and the handwriting on the messages appeared unusually familiar. Neighbors recalled seeing Chris leave for the gym early that morning, calm and alone. By the end of the day, the murders once framed as a hate crime began to look like something much more personal. Chris and Sherry had been high school sweethearts, married young, and admired by their congregation. To outsiders, they were the perfect Christian couple, smiling photos, family trips, and church events that displayed unity and grace. Chris earned a lucrative salary as Joyce Meyer's chief of security, traveling with the ministry, meeting pastors, and living comfortably in their upscale neighborhood. But beneath the surface, the image was collapsing. Chris was carrying heavy debt and was deeply involved in an affair with a Florida woman named Tara Lintz, one of Sherry's former friends. Text messages later revealed his growing resentment toward his wife and his desire to start over. While Sherry prayed to save the marriage, Chris was planning a new life that couldn't coexist with his public image. The investigation quickly turned toward the supposed death threats Chris had reported months before the murders. He had shown Joyce Meyer and police several emails warning that his family would die because of his job. "Tell Chris his family is dead." One read, "This is punishment." Investigators trace the messages, only to find they had been sent from Chris's own laptop. The staged graffiti inside the home matched the same language and style. Surveillance footage contradicted his alibi. His car was seen parked at home during the time he claimed to be at the gym. Then, forensics uncovered evidence of premeditation. His phone activity paused during the hours of the murders. Each piece of digital proof stripped away the illusion he had so carefully maintained. On May 19, 2009, police arrested Chris Coleman. When confronted with the evidence, the suspect gave a statement that shifted the entire case. He denied involvement, claiming an intruder had staged the threats, but investigators presented the truth. The emails, the cell phone data, and the timing of the murders all pointed to him. They concluded that Chris had killed his wife and children to escape his marriage without losing his job or his public image. His motive was not passion or rage, but reputation, the fear of humiliation in a world where he preached integrity. The trial began in April 2011 and drew national media attention. Prosecutors described the murders as cold and calculated, while the defense struggled to explain the overwhelming digital evidence. After 11 hours of deliberation, the jury found Chris Coleman guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The verdict sent shockwaves through the Christian community, especially Joyce Meyer Ministries, where Coleman had once been trusted as protector of faith. In interviews, Meyer said he could have kept his job even after divorce, a revelation that made his crime appear senseless. Today, Chris Coleman remains imprisoned in Illinois, occasionally claiming innocence. His story stands as one of the most disturbing examples of hypocrisy in American religious life, a man who preached virtue, killed for vanity, and destroyed everything he claimed to defend. Case 7. In the early hours of May 11, 2012, emergency services in Derby, England, responded to reports of a house fire on Victory Road. Flames were tearing through the home of 55-year-old Mick Philpott, a man once known for his large family and frequent television appearances. 6 of his children, Jade, John, Jack, Jesse, Jaden, and Duane, were trapped inside. As firefighters fought to reach them, neighbors watched Philpott collapse in the street, weeping and shouting for help. Television cameras soon captured his grief, turning him into the face of a national tragedy. According to investigators, the first signs of doubt appeared when experts realized the blaze had started inside the house, not from outside as initially believed. The fire began shortly before 4 a.m. and spread with unusual speed. By the time firefighters entered, smoke had filled every room. The children, aged 5 to 13, were found unconscious in their beds. All 6 later died from smoke inhalation. Initially, police treated the incident as a deliberate attack, perhaps revenge from someone targeting the family. Philpott, known to local media as Britain's biggest father, gave emotional interviews outside his burn home, pleading for answers. But investigators noticed inconsistencies. The house showed no sign of forced entry, and accelerant residues were detected near the doorway. Within days, the theory shifted. This wasn't a random act of violence, but something staged from within. Mick Philpott had become infamous long before the tragedy. He was a father of 17 children by multiple women, living on state benefits, and frequently appearing on talk shows to defend his unconventional lifestyle. With his wife, Mairead, and longtime mistress, Lisa Willis, he shared a crowded household that became tabloid fodder. He thrived on public attention, presenting himself as both victim and showman. But beneath the bravado, he was violent, controlling, and deeply manipulative. When Willis finally left him in early 2012, taking her 5 children, Mick lost not only control but also the welfare payments tied to them. To him, it wasn't love lost, it was status, money, and dominance slipping away. His obsession with revenge began the moment she walked out the door. Forensic investigators traced the cause of the fire to the downstairs hallway. Samples revealed traces of petrol, suggesting deliberate ignition. Surveillance footage from a nearby petrol station showed Mick and Mairead purchasing fuel the day before the fire. Detectives also recovered phone records revealing coordination between Mick, Mairead, and their friend Paul mostly hours before the blaze. The plan, prosecutors later alleged, was to start a small fire at the house, rescue the children, and frame Lisa Willis for attempted murder. It was meant to restore Mick's reputation and win back public sympathy. But their timing and execution went fatally wrong. Then, During the second round of questioning, Murray's composure cracked, and she began revealing details that exposed the truth behind the tragedy. Under pressure, Murray confessed that she and Mick had planned the fire as a hoax to regain media attention and make Lisa look guilty. When confronted with the evidence, the suspects gave statements that shifted the entire case. They claimed they expected to save the children before the fire spread, but investigators showed that the speed and placement of the blaze left no chance of survival. The confession turned the case from an arson investigation into one of reckless indifference and ego-driven cruelty. Prosecutors argued that Mick's motive wasn't insanity or grief, it was pride. He wanted to be seen as a heroic father once again, even if it meant endangering his own children. The trial began in 2013 at Nottingham Crown Court. Jurors heard testimony about Philpott's history of violence, manipulation, and control over the women in his life. The prosecution described him as a man consumed by narcissism, incapable of empathy. Murray and Paul Mosley were charged alongside him. All three were found guilty of manslaughter. On April 4, 2013, Mick Philpott was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 15 years. His wife and Mosley received 17-year sentences. The verdict ignited national outrage. Media outlets condemned the case as a grim reflection of exploitation and moral decay, while charities demanded reforms to prevent similar abuses of the welfare system. Mick Philpott remained behind bars, remembered not as a grieving father, but as a man who killed his children to feed his ego, a tragedy born not from poverty, but from pride. Case 8. In November 1971, neighbors in the quiet town of Westfield, New Jersey, began to notice something odd about the grand Victorian mansion at 431 Hillside Avenue. The lights, once glowing through elegant windows, were dark. The mail piled up, milk delivery sat untouched, and a family car remained in the driveway. Days turned into weeks with no sign of the List family. According to investigators, the first signs of alarm appeared when concerned neighbors finally alerted police. Inside the house, officers would uncover one of the most methodically planned family murders in American history, and a letter that revealed a killer convinced he was saving souls. When police entered the mansion on December 7, 1971, they were struck by an eerie silence. Organ music played softly through the intercom system, echoing through the halls. In the ballroom, 5 bodies lay neatly arranged on sleeping bags: wife Helen, daughter Patricia, sons John Jr. and Frederick, and upstairs, his elderly mother, Alma. Each had been shot at close range. A note on the desk addressed to the family's pastor explained everything. John Emil List had executed his family to save them from corruption of the world. It was a confession steeped in religion, control, and delusion. The house, cold and meticulous, told a story of planning, not passion. John List had been the image of a respectable man, a devout Lutheran, a veteran, and a quiet accountant. He lived by rigid moral rules. But beneath the calm exterior, his life was collapsing. He had lost his job and was secretly unemployed for months, too proud to tell his family. Each morning, he dressed in his suit, carried his briefcase, and spent the day at the train station reading newspapers until it was time to come home. Financial ruin loomed. His wife's health was failing, and his children were becoming more independent. To List, the world felt spiritually doomed. In his mind, he believed that killing his family would send them to heaven and spare them the shame of poverty. It was a deadly distortion of faith. After the murders, List vanished. Detectives followed every lead, but he left almost no trace. The mansion's thermostat had been turned low to slow decomposition, and he had cut himself out of every family photo to hinder identification. Weeks passed before the bodies were even discovered, and by then, List was long gone. The house, nicknamed Breeze Knoll, became infamous, a monument to quiet horror. Over the next 18 years, the case grew cold. Then, in 1989, forensic artist Frank Bender created an age-progressed clay bust of List for the television program America's Most Wanted. The model showed an older man with glasses and a receding hairline, a hauntingly accurate prediction that would soon break the case. The bust aired nationwide, and within days, a neighbor in Richmond, Virginia, called police. The man living next door, known as Robert Clark, matched the sculpture perfectly. He was an accountant, a churchgoer, and a quiet husband. When authorities approached him, he calmly denied wrongdoing but agreed to go to the station. Fingerprint confirmed what his demeanor did not. Robert Clark was John List. When confronted with the evidence, the suspect gave a statement that shifted the entire case. After 18 years in hiding, he simply said, "Yes, I am John List." His composure was chilling, his tone measured, as if admitting to a minor lie rather than mass murder. In 1990, List stood trial for 5 murders. His defense argued mental illness, claiming he believed he was acting on divine instruction to save his family from eternal damnation. Prosecutors countered that the crime was premeditated and driven by pride, not faith. The jury agreed. John List was found guilty on all counts and sentenced to 5 consecutive life terms. He showed no visible remorse. From prison, he gave rare interviews, insisting that his actions had been God's will and expressing only mild regret that his plan had failed to end his own life. He died behind bars in 2008 at age 82, unrepentant to the end. The case of John List endures as one of the most chilling examples of religious delusion turned deadly, a man who murdered his family not in rage, but in cold conviction that he was doing right. Case 9. For over 3 decades, the city of Wichita, Kansas, lived under the shadow of a faceless killer known only by 3 letters: BTK, bind, torture, kill. To his neighbors, Dennis Rader was a choir compliance officer, church president, and Boy Scout leader. He attended services, raised 2 children, and enforced city codes with politeness. But by night, he became one of America's most methodical serial killers. According to investigators, the first signs of terror appeared in January 1974, when a family of 4 was found murdered inside their suburban home. The crime would begin a decades-long hunt for a man hiding in plain sight. On the morning of January 15, 1974, police entered the home of the Otero family after a relative reported concern. Inside, they discovered the bodies of 38-year-old Joseph, his wife Julie, and their 2 children, Joseph Jr. and Josephine. Each had been bound, strangled, and arranged with deliberate precision. There were no signs of forced entry. Detectives described the crime scene as unusually organized, controlled, ritualistic, and cold. Later that year, letters arrived at local news stations and police headquarters. The writer claimed responsibility, detailing the murders with information only the killer could know. He signed the message with a chilling acronym BTK. What began as a local homicide case became a psychological chess match between a killer and an entire city. Dennis Rader appeared to be the model citizen. Born in 1945, he worked for a home security company before joining municipal code enforcement in Park City. He was married, devoutly religious, and active in community programs. Friends described him as strict but responsible, obsessed with order and rules. Yet beneath the normal facade lived a compulsion for domination and suffering. Rader later confessed that he developed violent fantasies as a child, which he carefully disguised behind his calm demeanor. His victims, chosen at random, were often women living alone, stalked for weeks before their deaths. The contradiction between his public virtue and private violence defined him. He was a neighbor everyone trusted, and the monster no one suspected. The investigation into BTK consumed Wichita for years. Police received dozens of letters, poems, and coded messages from the killer, who taunted detectives for their failures to catch him. He described his murders as projects and gave each victim a number. Despite the detailed communication, BTK would vanish for long stretches of time, sometimes decades, only to re-emerge when public attention faded. Forensic technology in the 1970s and 1980s failed to produce matches, leaving detectives frustrated. By the late 1990s, many believed BTK was dead or imprisoned. Then, in 2004, after 25 years of silence, a letter arrived at a local newspaper. The message contained photographs, a victim's driver's license, and a word puzzle. The game had begun again, and police knew the killer was still watching them. In early 2005, BTK sent a new message on a floppy disk, asking police if it could be traced. Detectives, playing along, told him it was safe. The disk was analyzed and revealed metadata linking the file to Christ Lutheran Church and a user named Dennis. Investigators cross-referenced the information with church records and found Dennis Rader, the longtime president of the Congregation Council. They began surveillance, collecting DNA from a discarded tissue used by his daughter. It matched the crime scene evidence perfectly. When confronted with proof, the suspect gave a statement that shifted the entire case. Rader calmly confessed, describing each murder in exacting detail, expressing pride in his precision. He showed no remorse, only irritation that his capture ended his projects. In June 2005, Dennis Rader pleaded guilty to 10 counts of first-degree murder. The courtroom fell silent as he described each killing with chilling composure, recounting how he bound his victims, documented their deaths, and returned to their homes to relive the crimes. He was sentenced to 10 consecutive life terms, ensuring he would never be released. Even after conviction, investigators continued to review unsolved cases across Kansas, suspecting his involvement in more deaths. Rader remains in prison at the El Dorado Correctional Facility, maintaining the same cold demeanor that once fooled his neighbors. His name had become synonymous with the banality of evil, a reminder that sometimes the most dangerous killer is the one who sits in the church pew, smiling, while his city trembles in fear. Case 10. On August 30, 2023, police in Ivins, Utah, responded to a 911 call made by a terrified 12-year-old boy who had escaped through a window of a home belonging to therapist Jody Hildebrandt. The child was emaciated, covered in duct tape, and begging for food and water. When officers arrived, they discovered evidence of prolonged abuse, open wounds, restraints, and signs of starvation. Within hours, the case drew nationwide attention. According to investigators, the first signs of recognition appeared when they realized who the woman inside the house was, Ruby Frankie, a well-known YouTube personality whose channel, 8 Passengers, had once been a portrait of wholesome family life. The 911 call described a boy who looked malnourished, with tape around his wrists and ankles. Deputies entered the property and found another child in similar condition. The home, belonging to Hildebrandt, co-founder of the controversial counseling organization Connections, appeared empty of normal living conditions. Both children were immediately hospitalized. Ruby Frankie, 41, was arrested at the scene, while Hildebrandt was taken into custody shortly afterward. The incident shocked the millions of viewers who had followed Ruby online for years, watching her videos about strict parenting, faith, and moral discipline. The discovery exposed a hidden world of control, punishment, and fanaticism behind what had once seemed like an ordinary suburban family brand. Ruby Frankie began 8 Passengers in 2015, chronicling her life as a mother of 6 in Utah. The channel grew to nearly 2.5 million subscribers, featuring family meals, homework routines, and moral lessons. Her husband, Kevin, appeared occasionally, but Ruby's parenting drew criticism long before her arrest. In one viral video, she refused to give lunch to her young son as punishment, calling it a learning opportunity. As her content became more severe, viewers raised concerns about emotional abuse. In 2022, Ruby stepped away from YouTube and began working with Jody Hildebrandt, a therapist known for promoting extreme obedience under the banner of truth and repentance. Together, they created Connections, a program that blurred the line between therapy and cult ideology, isolating followers, enforcing punishment, and framing suffering as spiritual correction. When detectives entered Hildebrandt's home, they found clear evidence of prolonged captivity. Food was locked away, duct tape and rope were scattered throughout, and windows had been sealed. The children described being denied water, beaten, and forced to perform tasks for repentance. Forensic examination showed severe malnutrition and wounds consistent with restraints. Investigators learned that Ruby's other 4 children had also been isolated from relatives for months. Jody Hildebrandt's writings, seized from the home, outlined doctrines of humility through suffering, describing control and starvation as acts of divine love. Then, during interviews with the rescued children, a detailed pattern of abuse emerged, one that transformed an internet scandal into a criminal indictment. Within days, both women were charged with multiple counts of aggravated child abuse. When confronted with the evidence, the suspects gave statements that shifted the entire case. Ruby claimed she had been helping her children repent, while Hildebrandt described the punishments as spiritual correction. Prosecutors rejected their explanations, calling the acts deliberate torture disguised as therapy. Forensic data from Connections videos and text messages revealed planning and coordination between the 2 women. The case expanded as authorities found records showing Ruby had cut ties with her extended family months earlier, under Hildebrandt's influence. The partnership between the influencer and the therapist had turned into a closed system of manipulation, where faith was twisted into justification for cruelty. In February 2024, Ruby Frankie and Jodi Hildebrandt both pleaded guilty to 4 counts of aggravated child abuse. The courtroom fell silent as prosecutors read graphic details of the suffering inflicted on the children. Each woman was sentenced to serve up to 30 years in prison, 60 years combined. During sentencing, Ruby broke down, stating she had been deceived by evil, while Jodi remained expressionless. The case reignited a national debate about parenting content on social media and the blurred boundary between influence and exploitation. YouTube permanently deleted 8 passengers, and Utah lawmakers began drafting bills regulating family vlogging. The surviving children remain under state protection and ongoing care. The story of Ruby Frankie and Jodi Hildebrandt stands as a warning of what happens when image, power, and faith collide, when a family built for the internet becomes a prison built by belief.